to finish this sentence for me. Today is
gonna be the day that we're gonna find out how much regret we feel.
Welcome to A Different Corner, a fantasy football podcast, the only George Michael themed fantasy football podcast. I'm Manish Verma, and this is a podcast where two dads basically grumble their way from game week to game week, trying to squeeze in some sort of educated transfer in between work, parental duties, and families. I didn't manage to do that this week because I actually missed the deadline the first time this season. It's not going to be the first time. It's going to happen a lot to me, I feel like, this season. I am ever joined by Dr. Luman Ali. Luman, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Especially off the back of the result at Anfield. Coming into this season, I didn't think Slot would be a disaster. If you asked me, would I have predicted we'd play the way we've played? No, it's going better than expected. I thought defensive midfield would be an issue. It looks like Ryan Gravenberch is doing a fantastic job at the moment. I'm still concerned because, we need depth there. If Gravenberch becomes such an important player for us, we'll miss him if he's not there. So, but all in all, I mean, it was just fantastic to watch. The other thing that I'm ecstatic about, absolutely ecstatic about, one thing that we don't talk about on this show is us playing football, and we played football with each other for many years, right?
Yeah.
I think it's better if it comes from you where I play and how I like to play. Bearing in mind, we play at the lowest level imaginable, which is a kick-out amongst friends. So I don't want anyone thinking that, I'm at any crazy level. But what position do I like to play, Manish?
So you're a defender who has an eye for goal. Is that a fair assessment, Luman?
On a smaller pitch, yeah. On a bigger pitch, not so much. But
yeah,
I do like defending and I like defense. Don't get me wrong, I don't like watching purely defensive football, but I just love how solid Liverpool are at the moment. Absolutely rock solid, and it's going to be something for us to discuss. So I'm very happy. How about you?
Well, I think it's we were talking about it just before we hit record in a week where Oasis announced they were reuniting. Are you sipping champagne supernova or looking back in anger at your FPL score? I am not quite sipping champagne, but I'm certainly not looking back in anger. I'm starting the week again talking about an Erling Haaland mega haul, but without having him in my team. Should I be kicking myself from last week? I was basically talking about how you don't need Erling Haaland because there are other players there. You can split that money. And he needs to score, I said, a brace at least for him to be worth 15 plus million. Now it's 15.2 from what I've seen at least. And then he goes and does what he does again. And on those game weeks, he's absolutely worth the money. Absolutely. On a brace game week, he's absolutely worth the money. But I didn't have him again. But all three of my strikers scored. I had Kai Havertz, Nicholas Jackson, and Isak at Newcastle. All of them came through for me. I ended up without Erling Haaland on a respectable, I think, 73, because I also got double-digit hauls from Mo Salah, Eze, and Bukayo Saka. And I managed to squeeze in a 4 and assist from Anthony Robinson, who gets his second assist of the campaign. Otherwise, Jota didn't do anything. Dan burned me with an own goal. Konza 2 and David Raya 2. So I'm not looking back in anger, even despite not having Erling Haaland, despite having another big red arrow and dropping massively. But I'm still not so pessimistic, and I'll explain why. But how about you?
I think it's important to note that both of us going into Sunday were on like 20s. You had 26 and I had 23, and then we got what we got.
Yeah.
For me, similar to you, Salah got me 17 points. For once, my forwards got me points. Isak got me 9, and Watkins got me an assist. Watkins is having a stinker at the moment. I mean, he's missing clear chances. Who did it for me this week was Mbeumo, who got me 14 points.
Ooh, yes, very good.
And Cole Palmer, who I captained and I expected him to get me a big return. He didn't. He only got me 6 points, and he was my captain. He got me 12. The thing about Haaland is, it's interesting. You and I look at it differently. You talk about if he's not, getting you that brace, then you're wasting 15 million. I don't see it like that. I just see it as, if for him, you've got to look at the season as a whole, right? And he's doing it more over the course of a season than some of these other players at the moment. I mean, my forwards have been awful, absolutely awful, right?
Remind us who they are again. Watkins?
So Watkins, Isak, and Solanke.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. But I've had a think, and I think that there's 5 different types of fantasy football teams this year.
Okay.
So there's those teams that have got either Haaland or Salah, one or the other.
Yep.
And then you've got a few players who've made contributions.
Yeah.
Those are our teams.
Yeah.
Right? Then you've got those teams that have got Haaland or Salah, but they've not picked wisely around them and they've not done too well.
Fine. Yeah.
Then you've got the ones that have got Haaland and Salah.
Yeah.
But then they've got other players who've contributed, and they're the ones leading this year. Like in our different corner league. The guy who's top, Jimmy, that's what he's doing. He's got Haaland, Salah, but his other guys are returning. Luis Diaz, Brian, and Mbeumo, his defenders. So they're the ones who are doing the best. Then you've got the ones who've got Haaland and Salah, both, but then they don't have a stronger supporting cast, but they're doing similar point returns to what we are. Not too far off. And then you've got the ones, there's a tiny minority who don't have either Haaland or Salah. I don't know what they're playing at. I'd love to know. So that's my analysis right there.
That's a fantastic summary, I feel like, and I think you're right. I think that is it's only 3 game weeks in, but those two, historically big hitters in the last couple of years, Haaland, before that is certainly Salah's been doing it for way longer, have just started on fire this season. And you have to have at least one of them, really. I mean, with the ones that are leading the pack at the minute, you have to have both of them, but be canny and be smart about the money elsewhere.
Yep.
And I mentioned it last week, those budget ballers are doing it. João Pedro has been consistently doing it. I'm going to miss them because I don't know them all. Luis Diaz, who last week we said the sensible option at Liverpool away from Salah is Diego Jota.
Yep.
But Luis Diaz comes out and does what he's been doing. Unbelievable. Yep. So it is. I think it's a really good summary of where, that last bracket of player, I don't know what they're thinking of not having either of them in. They're just making it harder for themselves, but maybe more fun, possibly. Really going differential. They're going to win that week when Salah and Haaland don't do anything. They'll go big,
or they get rested for a Champions League game or something like that.
Yeah. But that's a bit of a wild punt to take. Otherwise, do we all want to be in that camp then of Haaland, Salah, and your very canny other players? Is that the long-term goal? Well, not even the immediate goal is to trying to get both of them in your team. Is that the goal?
Not necessarily. I'll be honest with you. For me, the last 2 weeks have been identical for me. Haaland scored his hat-trick and I've got mad because I've had my defense and my forward line is absolutely awful and I've been mad and I thought I need to get Haaland in, but then Cole Palmer, Mo Salah, these guys show up and they get me a respectable points haul. You were talking about me and Liverpool. What about you as an Arsenal fan? Talk to me. I mean, this impenetrable defense.
I mean, we you can't really talk from an Arsenal perspective. You can't really talk about this weekend's fixture without talking about the context of it all and the Declan Rice sending off. I personally think if, playing pretty much a half of football against, I think, a very good Brighton team with 10 men is really difficult. I think if we had 11 men on the pitch, I think we go off and win that game. I don't think we concede. I think Bukayo Saka gets me more than just an assist because he was my captain. And I think we put that game to bed fairly in that second half. That Declan Rice sending off was, for me, a farce. I'm going to say that, of course, I'm an Arsenal fan, but it's just so nonsensical a decision. But yeah, that's the context of it. Is the disappointing part of this is we went away to Villa and beat them, and then we drew to Brighton, and it feels like it sort of not negates that result, but kind of does. Like, if we had drawn to Villa away and beat Brighton at home, that's kind of the result you would have expected. But now it kind of undoes that result. Or, I'm just thinking, all I'm thinking is, Man City, what are they going to do? Man City, what are they going to do? Every week you have to, if you're in the title run, if we are, you just have to see what they're going to do. And unfortunately, there's no margin for results like this.
Do you know what Pep said? He said that pre-season is over and the season starts after the international break.
Oh, that's comforting.
Yeah. So, would you say you're going to stock up on Liverpool defenders or goalkeepers because it's 3 clean sheets on the bounce now? And would you? I mean, apart from Salah, you've got Jota. Are you looking at any of the Liverpool players?
We have to talk about Liverpool, don't we? Because they've been the perfect start. 3 wins, no goals conceded. I've not watched a whole Liverpool match to know how many chances they conceded. On the highlights alone, it does look like Alisson's made some pretty important saves, but David Raya has made big saves. But I don't know if that's like a lot of shots being conceded. You tell me what.
Far fewer shots. So the difference between Jurgen Klopp and Arne Slot so far is under Jurgen Klopp, we created more chances, but we conceded a lot more chances.
Right.
It was a lot more end-to-end. When we're hardly conceding chances. I mean, last week against Brentford, their chances came from set pieces. Right. This week, United's chances came from us putting off the pedal. For me, I was confident with Liverpool based on pre-season. So I picked 3 Liverpool players. But those 3 players are from great to awful. So great is Mo Salah. In the middle is Jota, who's got 1 return and 2 blanks, but he's getting clean sheets, 2 clean sheets. You can't knock that. But then Kwanzaa has killed me. He's not played more than a half of football, and his value's dropped to 4.3 million. So he's killed me. So I've just had the wrong Liverpool players. Having said that, Kwanzaa's not the only player who's killed me. Mikalenko, even though I've not had him, guy, not only does his value drop, but Everton are up 2-0 against Bournemouth. I'm getting clean sheets for him, and then they concede 3.
Horrible. I mean, to be an Everton fan this weekend, like, also, are Everton the team to, target against, do you think now? Last season, it was like, oh, who are Luton playing? Let's get their defence in, or their the attackers in. Do you think Everton are that team now? Like, oh, we're playing Everton, get in, they can't score or they can't attack. Are they that team now?
I think Sean Dyche will get it together eventually. The question is when. Make no mistake about it, they've had a horrific start.
Yeah.
But even then, on their team, there's not many players you'd consider. Maybe the defenders, if they get it together,
My only Everton shout is I was kind of drafting my team up, and my only Everton shout was Michael Keane, because he was at 4 million and he will start. And if they can finally seal their defense up, he will probably be in there. So a cheap 4 million, but on Everton's current form, I don't even want to consider that. Just across Merseyside, back to Liverpool quickly. Luis Diaz, Luman. I mean, should I be getting rid of Diego Jota and sticking Luis Diaz in? And who is getting more of the chances? Obviously, he took the headlines this weekend, but Jota's got what? 1 goal, 1 assist. Luis Diaz is at 3 goals, 1 assist, and 3 in the first game, and 14 and 15. He's only finished a 90 minutes once, however. So that's also to bear in mind. But as a Liverpool fan, where what's your advice?
As it stands now, because they're both starting, it's pure luck. It's very similar. It's very similar to season before last. Martinelli, Saka, and Odegaard. They both scored 15 goals each, right?
Yeah.
It was just a question of getting them, each player, when they were in that run of form. So
that's good to know.
It's that, but Liverpool are hot, Everton not so hot, but Brighton, Brighton, a lot of people didn't pick their players, me included, because they looked at their fixture list and thought, yikes, the first 3 fixtures are tough. Yeah, they've won 2, drawn 1, and lost none, and now their fixtures look juicy.
Yeah.
You've got Minte. Who else are you looking at?
I've got Minte, and I've not started him 1 game yet. In that time, he's got 2 assists, but at 4 points only. So he's got a 4, a 2, and a 4, and he's been on my bench for every game week so far. Now he's got Ipswich at home, then Forest at home. He is definitely someone I'm looking to bring into my first 11. But João Pedro is the one. João Pedro is the one. He is at the focal point of that attack, and this is an attacking team from what I can see. Am I interested? I mean, Danny Welbeck is outscoring him so far as well. Danny Welbeck's got 2 goals and an assist. João Pedro has got 2 goals, simply, but 2 of his last 2 against Man U and Arsenal. Yeah, João Pedro for me because of that striker thing. But I feel like this is where a lot of teams are heading. A lot of FPL teams are heading for a Haaland and João Pedro strike force, and then maybe a Chris Wood, just something like that.
It sounds like you're going to make your team minty fresh. So, I look forward to it. I think I'm going to go all in on Brighton now. It's no secret. I like Minte. I like Mitoma. My doubts stem from who's going to be starting up top, especially if Evan Ferguson comes into it, and then you've got this Rutter as well. So that's the only thing that makes me nervous about Brighton in terms of who's going to play, because they've got a deep squad. They've learnt their lesson from last year, because as soon as injuries hit last year, they fell off. They've spent 200 million quid. Now they've had bad luck because the lad they signed from Celtic, O'Reilly, got injured with a bad one, but in general, they've got depth. They've got that much depth. They're sending players like Buonanotte and Barco out on loan. So
they're building something there. We've talked about Brighton being on the rise, but one team, once glorious Manchester United, aren't having such a good time of it. And what would it be, a fantasy football podcast with an Arsenal fan and Liverpool fan without having to laugh at United? And Luman, I've got to say, we've had our first listener contribution here, Luman. So I'm going to send this. This is my cousin Vinay, okay? Listen to this, my friend. Hey, Manish, it's your cousin Vinay, the Vinay from Evington, not the Vinay from Slough. I'm the other one. But if you do chat to him, though, tell him he still owes me like 20 quid from paintballing for the Stark do, man. Tell him to pay up, man. Anyway, I heard you got a podcast about FPL. That's pretty sick, actually. I was thinking of starting one myself, but you beat me to it. I actually think, no disrespect, my football IQ is probably a bit more than yours, superior and everything. So, anyway, I want to talk United, man. You know, I love them ever since 99, treble winners and everything. But this squad is a squad full of dickheads, man. Even the manager, Eric Ten Hag, no tactical awareness, no identity. In fact, he doesn't even know his own identity because he's asking reporters if he's Harry Potter. Huh? Quidditch, Hagrid, Hufflepuff. This guy has lost the plot, man. He's lost the dressing room. I want to ask you, do you think he's the first one to lose his job too? Anyway, talking of jobs, I got to go. I got to log on for my new role, technical consultant at Santander. Anyway, have me on the podcast sometime, man. I've got lots of views and opinions. Okay, see you later. Our first listener contribution, Luman.
That's brilliant. Yeah, he summed up the feelings of a lot of United fans. It was funny.
Is Eric Ten Hag going to be the first one to lose his job?
It's going to be an interesting one. I think what we've been seeing recently is teams are a lot more hesitant to change managers because of options out there. So I think with Ten Hag reminds me of Solskjaer. He just when you think he's had a bad result or he gets a good run of games and then bad. I love it. I love it as a Liverpool fan. Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher were going back and forth on this. Gary Neville said, "You want him sacked, don't you?" And Jamie Carragher said, "No, I want him to stay." So, you know, that about sums it up. But yeah, on a serious note, right? A lot of United fans, you know, have come to me and said, when Liverpool were bad, you never used to lose games like this. You never used to fold. You used to, like, you know, play, right? And I was like, yeah. And then it got me thinking, okay, why is that? I think it's the fan base. Liverpool fans are better. Why? Because, no, it's a fact. When we've had our tough times, we've stuck with our team. We've stuck with our team. We've had some awful times. These United fans, you know, they're abandoning the stadium. We've had some glorious comebacks in our history. Why? Because the fans believe there's hope. When United players have got 20,000 fans left out of 75,000, obviously going to impact them. So that's why that's the difference between us and United. Liverpool have got better fans, and it's a fact. That's the evidence. You know, we could be here all day talking about United.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll hear from my cousin Vinay, maybe later into the season.
Looking forward to it.
Very good. Right?
We've got an international break coming.
Yes.
What's the state of play with your team? Are you considering a wild card?
You know what? I was gonna look at it. So the worst thing happened to me that could have happened to me probably happened to me this week, in that Isak, Havertz, and Nicholas Jackson. Nicholas Jackson scores again. I've been watching Bo Selector clips. I apologize. And yeah, like, if Isak didn't return, I would have probably shipped him out and worked my wild card. And that's how fussy I'm being. But Isak returned finally, and then he's got Wolves next, Fulham after that. And I just think, it's maybe a week to keep him. Havertz scored again. Nicholas Jackson scored again. How can I drop a fairly good striking three to try and crowbar Haaland in, and certainly not get? I mean, can I even fit one of them in with him? I don't think so, because they're all a minimum 7.5 million. So I'm now not going to pull the trigger on my wild card after the international break, partly because, as well, my team, after the international break, depending on injuries, is almost all at home. Manu are away, and I've got Martinez there, but they're away to Southampton. And then most of them are at home. It's actually looking fairly good for me. Arsenal are away to Spurs, but, big game, big players, Saka and Havertz, I have to rely on them. But yeah, otherwise, I'm looking fairly good, actually. I could even hold a transfer and I would have then 2 to roll over. So I could even clock up so many. I get that 5 transfers and do a mini wild card potentially in a few weeks' time. So at the minute, I'm holding off on my wild card, but it all depends on what happens over the international break with injuries and whatnot. I mean, how do you assess your team and what you'll be doing?
I said it last week. My team needs major surgery because, especially at the back. I mean, I made a move this week. I bought Pau Torres in for Lewis Hall because Lewis Hall might, they've benched him for whatever reason, right? So Pau, but then Pau doesn't get a clean sheet against Leicester. So, that was incredibly frustrating.
That was, yeah.
So I've got Pau and Van der Ven, who I'm going to keep, but then I need to get rid of Kwanzaa. I need to move players out and get Brighton assets in. I mean, you've always called me a jinx, but Brighton, for God's sake, man, if they don't go on a tear now, then...
You say that, Luman. Look, the first next 2 are tasty. Ipswich at home, Forest at home.
Yeah.
But then in the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games, they've got to play Chelsea, Spurs, Newcastle, Wolves, Liverpool, and Man City. That's not easy.
They've got a tough start, no doubt, but they've got some juicy games in there.
Yeah,
and they're playing well. But that's where I'm at. But I think we're both in decent position. I think obviously it could be good to do better, but I think we're both fairly happy.
We are fairly happy that this week's posed a philosophical question to me, because Haaland went on a tear again, and those Haaland owners did better than me. Some actually I did better than, even though they had Haaland. But the guy who's leading the different corner FPL mini league, but also my family mini league, my cousin, who's got out of 3 game weeks, 200 plus game weeks, unbelievable, thanks to Haaland. But I kind of look at it and I think, you know what? Who am I competing against? This time last season, I did not have this good a start. And if you told me I'd have a 60, a 70 plus, and a 80 plus game week in my first 3, I would bit your hand off. I'm like, yeah, I'll take that. Haaland has just inflated everything, hasn't he? And so the question is, who are we Am I competing against you, Luman? Am I competing against the 10 million FPL players? Or am I competing against my own ability to get it right? My ability to am I guessing the right players? Am I guessing the teams are doing well? How do you approach who your competition is?
Oh, well, I think it's the same every season for me, regardless of Haaland's performance. I think you obviously compete against yourself. You want to do better. You kick yourself for those bad decisions. But bottom line is, you want to be top of your mini leagues. Simple as that. That's all it boils down to. And you can say what you want to make yourself happy, whatever, like we have done in this podcast. But make no mistake about it, from those categories of teams, that category with Haaland, with Salah, and with the players performing, the ones that have had, Joao Pedro or Mbuemo or Havertz, or Luis Diaz or Liverpool defenders,
Yeah.
They're the teams we want to be. I think if you're asking who's your man, then there's lots of choices to make.
Nice segue into our final little bit of the podcast. This is a George Michael themed podcast. It's one of his famous lyrics from a famous song, "I'm Your Man." So, Luman, in this part of the podcast, I want to ask you, of the two players I'm going to throw at you, can you tell me who is your man? Who would you rather have in your FPL team? And this one's a bit interesting because I've given you a premium player and I've given you a budget version, a budget equivalent. It's almost at least a £1.5 million difference between the two. Who would you rather have for the value, I suppose? Okay, Trent Alexander-Arnold versus Pedro Porro at Spurs. So Trent is about 7 million, Porro around 5.5.
I think this is a tough one because Porro, even if Spurs are leaky, he gets an assist or a goal. Trent's been the most expensive defender for a while now, and everyone's looking to see how Liverpool are doing defensively. Last year we were terrible, so it didn't make sense to bring him in, and he was injured. They're keeping clean sheets. I would go with Trent.
Trent, very good. Next one. I feel like I know where you're going to go here. João Pedro at Brighton and Isak at Newcastle. Isak is 8.5 million. João Pedro is at 5.7 now.
Now you're expecting me to say João Pedro automatically, but I'm not. The reason is he started well, but he's playing behind Welbeck. I want to see how many games he plays. Isak has had a terrible start, by fantasy standards.
Yeah.
But the guy has got pedigree. He's a top-notch player. In the short term, I'd go for João Pedro, but in the long term, I'd go for Isak.
Good answer. Next one, a bit of a kind of strange one. I think I've been influenced by just blonde-haired midfielders here. Emile Smith-Rowe, Anthony Gordon. Who's your
Anthony Gordon?
man?
I didn't even hesitate. Smith-Rowe let me down so badly this weekend. I was banking on him doing something at home. I'm not going to look at him again.
Anthony Gordon, however, has only returned in one game so far. Last season, he was your home banker. Like, if Newcastle were playing at home, he was getting points. He's played 2 home games this season and nothing from them both. So I'm not so certain. Emile Smith-Rowe is also $1.5 million cheaper. Or even 2 million cheaper, I think. Although I say that, Anthony Gordon has dropped in price to 7.4. I would probably go, I've got my Guna hat on here. I like Emile still there. Next one, Kai Havertz or Johan Wissa, Brentford.
Havertz. I need to figure out how to get Havertz in my team. I fancy Havertz to have a 20-goal season this season.
Wow. Even a Ivan Toney-less Brentford, so Wissa's going to start?
Yep, definitely. Okay. Because Brentford are Brentford, they're not as good as Arsenal. So that's an easy one, Havertz all the way.
Next one, and I think this is a very tasty one. Bournemouth's Semenyo versus Crystal Palace's Eze. And I should say there is a price difference here, although Eze dropped in price, strangely, of about $1.5 million. But also, I was just looking at the stats. These are the 2 players in the whole of the Premier League who have taken the most shots on goal. Semenyo with 17, Eze with 15. Not necessarily on target, but they take shots, basically.
Semenyo, and believe it or not, I'm not as high on Eze as most people. The reason is because of Michael Olise leaving.
Yeah.
If Olise hadn't left, my FPL team would have Olise, Mateta, and Eze in it also. I'm not even joking.
No, I can see why.
That would have been my team. Semenyo over Eze any day of the week.
Fair enough. I'm sort of leaning that way, although I like Palace's next fixture, which is Leicester City at home, and then Man U at home after that, and then Everton away. I was looking. I'm seriously looking at Semenyo. Really like him this season so far. And finally, this is a curveball. Everyone will be like, "What? This is not even a choice." But I really think it's a interesting one. Brian Mbeumo, Brentford. versus Cole Palmer. A massive price difference between the two of something like 3 million, something like that. But Brian Mbuemo has scored 3 goals this season, no assists. But Cole Palmer has got 4 assists this season. The reason I picked these two was because they have been a little bit erratic. Brentford, Mbuemo has got 9, 1, and then 14. And Chelsea's Cole Palmer has got a 2, a 17, and a 6. So that was the reason I kind of paired them up. But of course, there's a massive price difference here. But who are you getting most value for? Who's your man?
I've got both of them in my team, but if I had to just pick one, I'd take Cole Palmer. Reason being, I fell in love with Cole Palmer last year. I mean, this guy was doing it, man. And even this year, he's getting chances. He gets chances. The ball falls to him. Cole Palmer. Brian Mbuemo is the same situation as Wissa. He plays for Brentford. They're going to have a downturn.
So you've largely gone with the premium players there, apart from Semenyo versus Eze, and Bournemouth versus Palace. They're probably not the top teams in the league.
Bournemouth are a good team.
Yeah.
They're a better team. Palace have lost a key piece with Elise, and that's hard to replace. I mean, you're president of the Michael Elise fan club. I mean,
yeah, it's true. It is true. I wish he stayed in the Premier League. But yeah, that was I'm your man. Luman, I heard who your men were. We've got an international break, but that doesn't mean we're not going to record next week, because I want to do this thing where we kind of ask the question of what are they for each team in the league. What are Manchester City? We know what they are, probably going to be champions again. But the question is, who should you be getting? Are they defensively sound? Are they not? I think for a team like Chelsea, that's a really interesting question. What are they? And I want to go through who you think.
We'll be there. We'll be there.
We'll be there. Lovely, lovely. Well, I'll see you there, my friend.